Mona's English Learning Journey. Hello. My name is Mona, and I am learning English. Let me tell you about my journey. I hope my story will help you learn English, too. Chapter 1, My Decision to Learn English. One sunny morning, I sat by the window, watching the birds. I thought about all the wonderful books I could read and the songs I could sing if I learned English. So, I went to my parents and said, I want to learn English. My mother smiled and said, Mona, learning a new language is a great idea. It will open up many opportunities for you. My father added, we can help you find a good teacher and some interesting books. Grammar point, simple present tense. In this part of the story, I use the simple present tense to talk about facts and habits. For example, I want to learn English. I sat by the window. Chapter 2, My First Lesson. My parents found an English teacher named Mrs. Priya. She was kind and patient. On my first day, Mrs. Priya welcomed me with a warm smile. Welcome, Mona. Learning English will be a fun journey. We'll start with some basic words, Mrs. Priya said. We began with simple words like apple, book, and cat. I repeated each word carefully, trying to mimic Mrs. Priya's pronunciation. By the end of the lesson, I could say a few sentences. I have a cat. The cat is black. The cat likes to sleep. Vocabulary. Mimic, to copy the way someone speaks or behaves. Pronunciation, the way in which a word is pronounced. Grammar point, articles. In the sentences, I have a cat, and the cat is black, we use a to introduce something new and the when we are talking about something specific we already mentioned. Chapter 3, Practice Makes Perfect. I practiced my English every day. I labeled things around the house with their English names. The refrigerator had a label that said, fridge, the door had a label that said, door, and so on. I also started watching English cartoons and listening to English songs. One day, I decided to visit the village market. I wanted to practice my English with the vendors. I went to a fruit stall and said, hello, I would like some apples, please. The vendor smiled and handed me some apples. Here you go, young lady. That will be $2. I felt proud. I had successfully used English outside my lessons. Vocabulary. Label, a piece of paper or other material that gives information about the object it is attached to. Vendor, a person who sells something. Grammar point, politeness in requests. When asking for something in English, it's polite to say, I would like, or, could I have, followed by, please. For example, I would like some apples, please. Could I have a book, please? Chapter 4, My Pen Pal. Mrs. Priya had a surprise for me. She introduced me to Masa, a girl from England who was learning my native language. We decided to become pen pals. I wrote my first letter in English. Dear Masa, my name is Mona. I am learning English. I live in a small village. I have a cat named Whiskers. What about you? Your friend, Mona. Masa replied quickly. She wrote about her life in England, her school, and her pet dog named Max. Reading Masa's letters helped me learn more words and phrases. Vocabulary. Pen pal, a person with whom one becomes friendly by exchanging letters. Native language, the language someone learns from birth. Grammar point, present continuous tense. In the letter, I used the present continuous tense to talk about ongoing actions. For example, I am learning English. She is learning my native language. Chapter 5, The School Play. One day, Mrs. Priya told the class about the school play. It was a story about a brave knight and a dragon. I was excited and wanted to audition. I practiced my lines every day. On the day of the audition, I was nervous but determined. I delivered my lines confidently. I am the knight who will save the village from the dragon. My classmates clapped, and Mrs. Priya said, "Well done, Mona. You got the part." Vocabulary. Audition, a trial performance to evaluate a person's skill. Lines, the words that actors say in a play or movie. Grammar point, future simple tense. When talking about future actions or decisions, we use the future simple tense. For example, I will save the village. You will get the part. Chapter 6, The Big Day. The day of the play arrived. I wore a shiny costume and held a plastic sword. I stood on the stage and delivered my lines with confidence. The audience cheered and clapped. After the play, Mrs. Priya said, "Mona, you did an amazing job. Your English has improved so much." I felt happy and proud. I realized that learning English had opened up new experiences for me. Vocabulary. Costume, clothes worn to look like someone or something else. Audience, the group of people who watch a performance. Grammar point, past simple tense. In this part of the story, I used the past simple tense to talk about actions that were completed in the past. For example, the day of the play arrived. I wore a shiny costume. Chapter 7, The Journey Continues. I continued to learn and practice English. I read books, watched movies, and wrote more letters to Masa. I knew that learning a new language was a journey, and I was excited to see where it would take me. One evening, as I sat by the window with Whiskers on my lap, I looked at the stars and thought about all the possibilities that lay ahead. I knew that with determination and practice, I could achieve anything. Vocabulary. Determination, the quality of being firm in one's purpose. Possibilities, things that may happen or be true. Grammar point, modals for ability. When talking about abilities or possibilities, we use modal verbs like can and could. For example, I can achieve anything. I could read books and watch movies. Chapter 8, Exploring New Horizons. As I continued my journey of learning English, I found new ways to immerse myself in the language. One day, Mrs. Priya suggested joining an online English learning community. It was a place where people from all over the world practiced speaking and writing in English. I was a little nervous at first, but I decided to give it a try. I created an account and introduced myself to the group. Hello everyone. My name is Mona, and I am learning English. I live in a small village, and I love reading and playing with my cat, Whiskers. I'm excited to meet you all. Vocabulary. Immerse, to involve oneself deeply in a particular activity. Community, a group of people with a common interest. Grammar point, present perfect tense. In my introduction, I could also say, I have lived in a small village all my life. I have loved reading since I was a child. Chapter 9, Making New Friends. Through the online community, I met many new friends who were also learning English. One of them was a girl named Maria from Spain. We started chatting regularly. Maria was very enthusiastic and always encouraged me to keep practicing. One evening, Maria and I decided to have a video call. We were both a little shy at first, but soon we were chatting comfortably. We talked about our favorite books, movies, and hobbies. Vocabulary. Enthusiastic, having or showing intense and eager enjoyment, interest, or approval. Encourage, to give support, confidence, or hope to someone. Grammar point, comparative and superlative adjectives. Maria and I compared our favorite things. This book is better than that one. That movie is the best I've ever seen. Chapter 10, A Trip to the City. One weekend, my parents decided to take a trip to the city. I was excited because I would have the chance to practice my English in a new environment. We visited a museum, a bookstore, and a cafe. At the museum, I read the information plaques in English. At the bookstore, I found a new English novel to read. And at the cafe, I ordered food in English. Hello. Can I have a sandwich and a cup of tea, please? The waiter smiled and said, Of course. Your English is very good. Vocabulary. Plaque, a flat, thin piece of metal or wood with writing on it, used as a label or sign. Novel, a long written story, usually about imaginary characters and events. Grammar point, asking for things politely. In the cafe, I used polite phrases. Can I have? Could I get? Chapter 11, The English Club. Back at school, Mrs. Priya announced the start of an English club. She invited all students interested in practicing their English to join. I was thrilled and signed up immediately. At our first meeting, we played language games and practiced speaking. We also read short stories and discussed them. The club was a great way to improve my English and make new friends. One of our activities was to act out scenes from English stories. I enjoyed playing different characters and using new vocabulary. Vocabulary. Announce, to make a public or formal statement about something. Activity, something that you do for enjoyment or to achieve a goal. Grammar point: direct and indirect speech. When sharing what Mrs. Priya said. Direct speech: Mrs. Priya said, "We are starting an English club." Indirect speech: Mrs. Priya announced that we were starting an English club. Chapter 12, Learning Through Stories. In the English club, we often read and discussed stories. One story that I particularly enjoyed was about a young girl who traveled the world. Through her adventures, she learned about different cultures and languages. Inspired by the story, I started writing my own short stories in English. Writing helped me practice grammar and expand my vocabulary. I shared my stories with Mrs. Priya and my classmates, who gave me feedback and encouragement. Vocabulary. Discuss: to talk about something with someone. Feedback: information about reactions to a product, a person's performance of a task, etc., used as a basis for improvement. Grammar point: using past tense in stories. When writing or telling stories, we often use the past tense. She traveled the world. She learned about different cultures. Chapter 13, Preparing for an English exam. As my English improved, Mrs. Priya suggested that I take an English proficiency exam. At first, I felt nervous, but I knew it would be a good challenge. Mrs. Priya helped me prepare by giving me practice tests and tips. I studied hard, focusing on reading, writing, listening, and speaking. I practiced with my friends from the English club and even had mock exams with Mrs. Johnson. Vocabulary. Proficiency: a high degree of skill, expertise. Mock exam: a practice test taken as preparation for an actual exam. Grammar point: future continuous tense. Mrs. Priya explained what we would be doing. We will be practicing every day until the exam. You will be taking the exam next month. Chapter 14, The Exam Day. The day of the exam finally arrived. I felt both excited and nervous. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of all the hard work I had put in. The exam had different sections: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. I focused on each part, doing my best to remember all the tips and techniques Mrs. Priya had taught me. After finishing the exam, I felt relieved and proud of myself. Vocabulary. Remind: to cause someone to remember something. Relieved: feeling relaxed and happy because something difficult or unpleasant has been stopped or avoided. Grammar point: past perfect tense. When talking about events that happened before another past event. I felt proud because I had studied hard. I had prepared well, so I was confident. Chapter 15, Results and Celebration. A few weeks later, I received my exam results. I had passed with flying colors. I was overjoyed and couldn't wait to tell my family and friends. We celebrated with a special dinner, and Mrs. Priya gave me a small trophy as a symbol of my achievement. I realized that learning English had not only helped me academically but had also given me confidence and new friendships. Vocabulary. Overjoyed, extremely happy. Achievement, something that has been done successfully, especially through effort. Grammar point, using idioms. In English, we often use idioms to express feelings or situations. I passed with flying colors means I did very well. Over the moon means very happy. Discussion points. 1. Vocabulary building. Discuss the new words I learned in each chapter. 2. Pronunciation practice. Practice saying the sentences I use in my lessons and at the market. 3. Role play. Act out the scenes from the story, especially the market visit and the school play. 4. Writing exercise. Write a letter to a pen pal like I did, introducing yourself and talking about your life. Questions for reflection. 1. What motivated me to learn English? 2. How did I practice my English at home and outside? 3. What challenges did I face, and how did I overcome them? 4. How did having a pen pal help me improve my English? 5. What did I learn from participating in the school play? By engaging with my story in these ways, you can practice reading, speaking, listening, and writing, making your learning process both fun and effective.